All right, so for this game, it looks like we have a two-tiered sequencing game. We have a sequential component. We have the 5 positions to work with. But for each position, we have to figure out 2 different things. We have to figure out who is going to be the speaker or the expert who's going to be speaking, and we have to figure out what language they're going to be speaking. And then from there, I guess let's take a look. We have the elements themselves, L, N, O, P, S. And we have the languages R, F, G, J, and M. Now, one thing that's kind of worth recognizing here is that, I mean, we have 4 languages, we have 5 positions to work with, which means one of the languages at least is going to double up. But it never actually tells us that every single language has to be used. So arguably, as of right now, if they all spoke French, that would be consistent with the initial setup. That wouldn't really break anything. And these are the kinds of things that you want to always kind of be on guard for. Anytime there's an irregularity where you have some things that might show up multiple times, you might want to start thinking about, okay, what are the limitations? Do I actually have to have everything? What's the minimum number of duplications or whatnot? So yeah, let's from there take a look at the rules. So the first rule tells us that exactly 2 of the presentations are in the same language as each other. Now, in terms of symbolization, this one's a bit of an awkward one, so I guess we can say something like exactly 2 of the presentations are duplicated in a sense in terms of the language. But the implication here is kind of what's important, and it's worth noting that this rule, this goes a long way, because based on this rule, this actually helps resolve what we just mentioned a moment ago regarding whether every language has to show up. Because if exactly and only essentially 2 of these presentations can have the same language, essentially that means that every language does have to be used. Because, for example, if 1 and 2 have the same language and they're the only ones that have the same language, then you're going to have the other 3 languages show up in 3, 4, and 5. So essentially, based on this rule, this now tells us that every language will have to be used, and exactly and only 1 language is going to double up. Next, the second rule tells us that the statistician has to give the second presentation in German. So I guess we can say something like statistician is in German and they are second, and we can, of course, plug that into the board. Next, lawyer has to be either French or Mandarin. So lawyer has to be either F or M, and they're going to be in the 4th position. So we can also reserve that. Next, oceanographer is going to be either F or J, and the same thing is true of the physicist. So I guess we can say O has to be either F or J, and the physicist also has to be either F or J. Although I suppose as of right now, they could arguably both be the same language. They could both be French, they could both be Japanese. So we have a little bit of flexibility there still. Anyways, last rule, first and last presentations are in Japanese. Ooh, that's pretty good. So 1 and 5, they both have to be Japanese. So first of all, that means that is going to be your duplicate. So everybody else has to show up exactly once. So the 3rd position, for example, this would have to be the other of M or F, because we have to have both of them show up exactly once now. In fact, as far as O and P are concerned, so if they speak the same language, it would have to be Japanese, since Japanese we now know is the only duplicate, and so they would have to go into 1 and 5. Although if they don't speak the same language, then I suppose one of them could go into 3. Oh, but then they would have to be speaking French specifically, and then L would be speaking Mandarin. So that actually might be worth exhausting, because O and P, we kind of have only 2 major directions that we can take. Either they're both going to be speaking Japanese, so we know exactly where they go, or one of them alternatively will have to go into position 3. So what we'll do is we'll set this up accordingly. We'll have the Japanese positions, of course, 1 and 5. So either O and P are going to shuffle between 1 and 5, or one of them is going to have to go into the 3rd position. Now, if they're in 1 and 5, then for sure we're going to have who's left? We have N, who is going to go into position 3. And in terms of languages, I guess these guys can still go either way, right? There's no real restriction One of them will speak French, one of them will speak Mandarin, so that's okay. In the bottom scenario, if we happen to have O or P in the third position, well, we know that they can't speak Mandarin, so they're going to have to speak French for sure. So Mandarin goes into position number 4. And then N is going to go into one of 1 or 5. They're going to be speaking Japanese with one of O or P. All right, yeah, that's a pretty good start. Let's see what we can do with this. So the first question here is our exclusion question, which asks what could be the complete... Actually, this doesn't give us the languages, so it's not quite a complete exclusion question, but the same thing applies. What could be the sequence 1 through 5? I suppose a good place to start is just, we know that S is going to be in 2 and L is going to be in 4. So let's see if anything violates that. A violates that. We can't have P second. B has S in 2, but L is third. That also doesn't work. C has N in 2. That doesn't work. That's pretty good. Answer choice D has S in 2 and L in 3. Again, L can't go third. That doesn't work. And lastly, we have S in 2 and L in 4, so that's okay. The best answer to question number 1 is E. Next, let's take a look at the local. Actually, we have a pretty good exhaustion. Let's just do these in order. Question number 2. Which of the following is a complete list of experts, any one of whom could be speaking Japanese? Well, in the top template, we said either O or P could be speaking Japanese. In the bottom template, you would have to have N speaking Japanese with one of O or P, but that's pretty much it, right? S and L obviously can't speak Japanese since they're in 2 and 4 and they already have languages assigned. So really it's just O, P, and N. The best answer here is answer choice C for question number 2. Next, question number 3. If the naturalist is speaking French, what could be true? Well, if the naturalist is speaking French, it's worth noting that would force us into the top template, because in the bottom template, naturalist is speaking Japanese. So if the naturalist is speaking French, then that just means that we are in the top template. They would have to speak French, and then the lawyer would have to speak Mandarin over here. So the question now asks, what could be true? O goes third, and no, because that's already N. Can we have O go fifth? And maybe O and P could arguably shuffle back and forth here, so that actually looks pretty good. Just in case, let's take a look at the other ones. L speaks French. Well, no, because if N was speaking French, then L had to speak Mandarin, so that wouldn't have worked. Answer choice D, oceanographer speaks French, and no, O and P currently are both Japanese. And physicist speaks in French, and no, same problem. O and P are currently both Japanese. So the best answer to question number 3 is B. Next, question 4. Which of the following is a complete and accurate list of languages, any one of which could be the third position? Well, we know that the third position really has to either be Mandarin or French, and in this case it has to be French. So really just M and F. The best answer to question number 4 is D. And lastly, so for question number 5, this is one of the more old school modifier questions. So they're asking us to replace this rule whereby S was speaking German in the second position with an entirely different rule that S has to be speaking Japanese. So I guess we can get rid of this. And we know that S now instead is going to have to be one of the Japanese speakers. Now, to be fair, this is kind of significant because that messes up a lot of what we already had. So let's set this up from scratch. As usual, we know that we have to have two of the languages double up, so that's fine. We don't know where the S goes, so that's a little bit more flexible. The fourth position, though, we can still reserve. This has to be either F or M over here. O and P are still going to be speaking French or Japanese. Although, actually, wait, we can do a little bit with this now, because if S is speaking Japanese, then arguably O and P can no longer both be speaking Japanese. So one of them is for sure going to be speaking French. And the other, we can't have two Frenches, right? Because we already know that 1 and 5 are both going to be Japanese, so Japanese is a double. So we can't have two Frenches. So between O and P, one of them is going to be speaking French, and then the other one will be speaking Japanese together with S. Oh, which furthermore, I guess that means that L can't really speak French anymore because French is accounted for. So L is definitely going to be speaking Mandarin. So that's kind of nice. Okay, let's see what we can do. The question asks, if everything remains, which of the following could be the sequence first to last of the experts? Oof. So first of all, I guess we know that L has to go fourth. So let's disqualify anything that violates that. So A is out. Answer choice B looks okay. C looks okay. D doesn't. L is third there. And E looks okay. And we know that S effectively is going to have to go either first or last. So now answer choice B looks fine. C, S can't go second, so we can get rid of that. And E, S is first. That actually still might be okay. So between answer choices B and E. Oh, I suppose the other thing we can say is O and P, one of them will still have to speak Japanese. So we'll have to have one of them in 1 or 5. So for answer choice B, there we go, that wouldn't work. We can't have O and P second and third because one of them is still a Japanese speaker. So that would get rid of B, and that leaves us with answer choice E, which is the best answer here.